Hello all, so today we are talking about chapter 3 and continuing with our human energy systems. So how is energy stored in the body? The ultimate source of all energy on earth is the sun. Solar energy is harnessed by plants which take carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen from their environment and manufacture either carbohydrate or protein. These plant foods contain not only the energy stored in carbohydrate, fat, and protein, but also various vitamins and minerals the body needs to process them during energy production. When we consume these foods, our digestion processes break them down into simple compounds that are absorbed into the body and transported to various cells. One of the basic purposes of body cells is to transform the chemical energy of these simple compounds into forms that may be available for immediate use or other forms that may be available for future use. So how is energy stored in the body? Energy in the body is available for immediate use in the form of adenosine triphosphate, or ATP. It is a complex molecule constructed with high energy bonds, which when split by enzyme action can release energy rapidly for a number of body processes, including muscle contraction. ATP is classified as a high energy compound and is stored in the tissues in small amounts. It is important to note that ATP is the immediate source of energy for all body functions, and the other energy stores are used to replenish ATP at varying rates. Myberg notes that muscle contraction is totally dependent on ATP, so the body has developed an intricate system to help replenish ATP as rapidly as needed. Another related high-energy phosphate compound, phosphocreatine, or PCR, is also found in the tissues in small amounts. Although it cannot be used as an immediate source of energy, it can rapidly replenish ATP. ATP also may be formed from either carbohydrate, fat, or protein after those nutrients have undergone some complex biochemical changes in the body. Figure 3.6 represents a basic schematic of how ATP is formed from each of the three nutrients. Because ATP and PCR are found in very small amounts in the body and can be used up in a matter of seconds, it's important to have adequate energy stores as a backup system. Your body's stores of carbohydrate, fat, and protein can provide you with ample amounts of ATP, enough to last for many weeks, even on a starvation diet. The digestion and metabolism of carbohydrate, fat, and protein are discussed in their respective chapters, so it is unnecessary to present that full discussion here. However, you may wish to preview Figure 3.12 to visualize the metabolic interrelationships among the three nutrients in the body. For those who desire more detailed schematics of energy pathways, Appendix F provides some of the major metabolic pathways for carbohydrate, fat, and protein. It is important to note that parts of each energy nutrient may be converted into other two nutrients in the body under certain circumstances. For example, protein may be converted into carbohydrate during prolonged exercise, whereas excess dietary carbohydrate may be converted into fat and in the body during rest. Figure 3.6 simplifies a schematic of ATP formation from carbohydrate, fat, and protein. All three nutrients may be used to form ATP, but carbohydrate and fat are the major sources via the aerobic metabolism of the Krebs cycle. Carbohydrate may be used to produce small amounts of ATP under anaerobic conditions, thus providing humans with the ability to produce energy rapidly without oxygen for relatively short periods. For more details, see Appendix F. Now, Table 3.3 summarizes how much energy is stored in the human body as ATP, PCR, and various forms of carbohydrate and protein, fat and protein. The total amount of energy represented by calories is approximate and may vary considerably between individuals depending on body size and composition, diet, physical fitness level. Carbohydrate is stored in limited amounts as blood serum glucose, liver glycogen, and muscle glycogen. The largest amount of energy is stored in the body as fats. Fats are stored as triglycerides in both muscle tissue and in adipose or fat tissue. Triglycerides and free fatty acids in the blood are a limited supply. The protein of the body tissues, particularly muscle tissue, is a large reservoir of energy but is not used to any great extent under normal circumstances. Table 3.3 also depicts how far an individual could run based on using the total of each of these energy sources as a sole supply. The role of each of these energy stores during exercise is an important consideration that is discussed briefly in this chapter and more extensively in the following chapters. So what are the human energy systems? Why does the human body store chemical energy in a variety of forms? If we look at human energy needs from a historical perspective, the answer becomes obvious. Sometimes humans needed to produce energy at a rapid rate, such as when sprinting to safety to avoid dangerous animals. Thus, a fast rate of energy production was an important human energy feature that helped ensure survival. At other times, our ancient ancestors may have been deprived of adequate food for long periods and thus needed a storage capacity for chemical energy that would sustain life throughout these times of deprivation. Hence, the ability to store large amounts of energy was also important for survival. These two factors, rate of energy production and energy capacity, appear to be determining factors in the development of human energy systems. One need only watch weekend television programming for several weeks to realize the diversity of sports popular throughout the world. Each of these sports imposes certain requirements on humans who want to be successful competitors. For some sports, such as weightlifting, the main requirement is brute strength, while others, such as tennis, quick reactions and hand-eye coordination are important. A major consideration in most sports is the rate of energy production, which can range from the explosive power needed by a shot putter to the tremendous endurance capacity of an ultra-marathoner. The physical performance demands of different sports require specific sources of energy. As noted previously, the body stores energy in a variety of ways, in ATP, PCR, muscle glycogen, and so on. In order for this energy to be used to produce muscular contractions and movement, it must undergo certain biochemical reactions in the muscle. These biochemical reactions serve as a basis for classifying human energy expenditure by several energy or power systems. In his 1979 sports physiology text, one of the first to discuss the application of human energy systems to sport, Edward L. Fox named 3 human energy systems: the ATP-PCR system, the lactic acid system, and the oxygen system. As noted below, other terminology may be used to describe the metabolic relationships to these 3 energy systems, but the original classification is still useful when discussing the application of human energy to sports performance. The ATP-PCR system is also known as the phosphagen system because both adenosine triphosphate and phosphocreatine contain phosphates. ATP is the immediate source of energy for almost all body processes, including muscle contraction. The high-energy compound stored in the muscles rapidly releases energy when an electrical impulse arrives in the muscle. No matter what you do, scratch your nose or lift 100 pounds, ATP breakdown makes the movement possible. ATP must be present for the muscles to contract. The body has a limited supply of ATP and must replace it rapidly if muscular work is to continue. The main purpose of every other energy system, including PCR, is to help regenerate ATP to enable muscle contraction to continue at the optimal desired rate. So ATP is broken down for energy. You can see the ATP, or adenosine triphosphate, is first stored in the muscle in limited amounts. Then it is split into a high energy bond that releases adenosine diphosphate, or ADP, inorganic phosphate, and energy, which can be used for many body processes, including muscular contraction. The ATP stores may be used maximally for fast, all-out bursts of power that last about 1 second. ATP must be replenished from other sources for muscular contraction to continue. So your ATP or PCR, again, it's known as the phosphagen system, and at your high energy sports that rely upon it. Now, if we look at the ATP-PCR energy system and resynthesis of ATP from PCR, PCR, which is also a high energy compound found in the muscle, can help form ATP rapidly as ATP is used. Energy released when PCR splits is used to form ATP from ADP and P, or phosphagen. PCR is also in short supply, but more than ATP, and has to be replenished if used. So PCR breaks down to help resynthesize ATP. So you can see in the diagram, PCR is stored in the muscle in limited amounts and splits of the high energy bond releases energy, which can be used to rapidly synthesize ATP from ADP and phosphagen. ATP and PCR also are called phosphagens, and together represent the ATP PCR energy system. The system is used primarily for quick maximal exercises lasting about 1 to 6 seconds or more, such as sprinting. Now the lactic acid system is a little bit different. The ATP PCR system is critical to energy production because these phosphagens are in short supply, and an all-out exercise for 5 to 10 seconds could deplete the supply, particularly PCR in a given muscle. Hence, the phosphagens must be replaced, and this is the function of the other energy sources. Increasing the level of PCR in the muscle would provide a greater fuel reserve and possibly enhance the performance of brief, high-intensity exercise. Creatine supplementation, which is discussed in later chapters, is one way athletes are increasing muscle PCR in an effort to enhance performance. In summary, the value of the ATP PCR system is its ability to provide energy rapidly. For example, in sport events such as competitive weightlifting or sprinting 100 meters. Anaerobic power is a term often associated with ATP PCR energy system. Now, the lactic acid energy system cannot be used directly as a source of energy for muscular contraction, but it can help replace ATP rapidly when necessary. If you are exercising at a high intensity and need to replenish ATP rapidly, the next best source of energy becomes PCR. Besides PCR is glucose. Glucose may enter the muscle from the bloodstream or may be derived from the breakdown of glycogen stored in the muscle. The glucose molecule undergoes a series of reactions to eventually form ATP, a process that is called glycolysis. The lactic acid system is diagrammed in figure 3.9. It is used in sport events in which energy production is near maximal for 30 to 120 seconds or 2 minutes, such as a 200 or 800 meter run. Anaerobic capacity is a term often associated with the lactic acid energy system. If you look here at this figure, the lactic acid energy system, the muscle glycogen and glucose break down without the utilization of oxygen. Therefore, that's why it's called anaerobic glycolysis. ATP is produced rapidly, but lactic acid is the end product. Once that lactic acid builds up, it's a major cause of fatigue in the muscle. The lactic acid energy system is utilized primarily during exercise bouts of very high intensity for about 30 seconds to 2 minutes, as said earlier. One of the major factors controlling the metabolic fate of glucose is the capacity of the mitochondria, which are cell organelles that need oxygen to produce or process glucose to ATP. If the muscle cell mitochondria can process the available glucose, then adequate oxygen is assumed to be available. This is known as aerobic glycolysis. Conversely, if the rate of glycolysis surpasses the capacity of mitochondrial oxidation to meet the energy demands of the exercise task or to maintain a high level of aerobic glycolysis, then insufficient ATP is formed, and lactic acid is a byproduct of the process necessary to increase ATP production. This process has been referred to as anaerobic because of inadequate aerobic processing by the mitochondria, and the term anaerobic glycolysis has been used as a scientific term for the lactic acid energy system. The following are physiological processes involved in oxygen uptake. Respiration, so the lungs are taking in oxygen from the atmosphere, and then it's circulated via the cardiovascular processes that occur from central circulation, where the heart's pumping oxygen-enriched blood, but also the peripheral circulation. So the arteries are carrying that oxygen-rich blood to the muscle tissues. And metabolism, which is muscle cells are taking in and using that oxygen to produce energy in the form of ATP, mainly from carbohydrates and fats, but also small amounts of protein. Now, the oxygen energy system, or the third system, is also known as as the aerobic system. Now, aerobics is a term that was termed by Dr. Kenneth Cooper in 1968 to describe a system of exercising that created an exercise revolution in this country. In essence, aerobic exercises are designed to stress the oxygen system and provide benefits for the heart and lungs. Figure 3.10 represents the major physiological processes that we just went over involved in the oxygen system. The oxygen system, like the lactic acid system, cannot be used directly as a source of energy for muscular contraction, but it does produce ATP in rather large quantities from other energy sources in the body. Muscle glycogen, liver glycogen, blood glucose, muscle triglycerides, blood-free fatty acids, and triglycerides, adipose cell triglycerides, and body protein all may be ultimate sources of energy for ATP production and subsequent muscle contraction. To do this, glycogen, fats, and protein must be present within the muscle cell or must enter the muscle cell as glucose, free fatty acids, or amino acids. Through a complex series of reactions, metabolic byproducts of carbohydrates, fats, and proteins combine with oxygen to produce energy, carbon dioxide, and water. These reactions occur in the energy powerhouse of the cell, the mitochondrion. The whole series of events of oxidative energy production primarily involve aerobic processing of carbohydrates and fats and small amounts of protein through the Krebs cycle and the electron transfer system. The Krebs cycle and the electron transfer system represent a highly structured array of enzymes designed to remove hydrogen, carbon dioxide, and electrons from substrates such as glucose. At different steps in this process, energy is released and ATP is formed, with most of the ATP produced during the electron transfer process. The hydrogen and electrons eventually combine with oxygen to form water. And here in the diagram, this is the oxygen energy system. You can see the muscle stores of glycogen and triglycerides along with blood supplies of glucose and free fatty acids, as well as small amounts of muscle protein and amino acids, undergo complex biochemical changes for entrance into the Krebs cycle and the associated electron transfer system. In this process, in which oxygen is the final acceptor to the electron, large amounts of ATP may be produced. The oxygen energy system is utilized primarily during endurance type exercises, those that last longer than 4 or 5 minutes. So here you see a simplified flow diagram of the energy systems. The major nutrients and oxygen are transported to the cells for energy production. In the muscles, ATP is the immediate source of energy for muscle contraction. The ATP PCR system is represented by muscle stores of ATP and phosphocreatine, or PCR, and it can replenish ATP rapidly. Glucose, or muscle glycogen, can produce ATP rapidly via the lactic acid system. The oxygen system can produce large amounts of ATP via the aerobic processes in the Krebs cycle, primarily oxidation of carbohydrate and fatty acids. Numerous other energy pathways exist, and some are talked about in Chapter 4, Chapter 5, and Chapter 6. The summary, the energy systems for exercise are discussed later in this chapter, but in brief, human energy systems for exercise may be classified as anaerobic or aerobic, and each may be subdivided into energy systems for power and capacity as follows. Anaerobic power is looking at the ATP PCR energy system. Anaerobic capacity is more of the lactic acid energy system, or anaerobic glycolysis. You have aerobic power, which is aerobic glycolysis, and then aerobic capacity, which is aerobic lipolysis, where you're breaking down fat. As noted, protein may be used as an energy source during exercise and has been referred to as aerobic proteolysis, but its contributions are considered minor, and it's not classified here as a separate energy system. Its contributions to energy production during exercise are covered in Chapter 6. So what nutrients are necessary for operation of the human energy systems? Although the energy for the formation of ATP is derived from the energy stores in carbohydrate, fat, and sometimes protein, this energy transformation and utilization would not occur without the participation of other major nutrients, water, vitamins, and minerals. These three classes of nutrients function very closely with protein in the structure and function of numerous enzymes. many of which are active in the muscle cell energy processes. Water is used to help break up and transform some energy compounds by a process known as hydrolysis. Several vitamins are needed for energy to be released from the cell sources. For example, niacin serves as an important function in glycolysis. Thiamine is needed to convert glycolytic end products to acetyl-CoA for entrance into the Krebs cycle, and riboflavin is essential to forming ATP through the Krebs cycle and electron transfer system. A number of other vitamin B vitamins are also involved in facets of energy transformation within the cell. Minerals, too, are essential for cellular energy processes. Iron is one of the more critical compounds. Aside from helping hemoglobin deliver oxygen to the muscle cell, it is also a component of myoglobin and the cytochrome part of the electron transfer system. It is needed for proper utilization of oxygen within the cell itself. Other minerals such as zinc, magnesium, potassium, sodium, and calcium are involved in a variety of ways, either as parts of active enzymes in energy storage or in the muscle contraction process. Proper utilization of body energy sources requires attention not only to the major energy nutrients but also to the regulatory nutrients, water, vitamins, and minerals. In addition, other nutrients and non-nutrients such as creatine and caffeine found in food may affect energy metabolism. So what is metabolism? Human metabolism represents the sum total of all physical and chemical changes that take place within the body. The transformation of food to energy, the formation of new compounds such as hormones and enzymes, the growth of bone and muscle tissue, the destruction of body tissues, and a host of other physiological processes are part of the metabolic process. Metabolism involves two fundamental processes, anabolism and catabolism. Anabolism is a building up process or constructive metabolism. Complex body components are synthesized from the basic nutrients. For the active individual, this may mean an increased muscle mass through weight training or an increased amount of cellular enzymes to better use oxygen following endurance type training. Energy is needed for anabolism to occur. Catabolism is the tearing down process. This involves the disintegration of body compounds into their simpler components. The breakdown of muscle glycogen to glucose and eventually CO2 or H2O, water, and energy is an example of a catabolic process. The energy released from some catabolic processes is used to support that energy needs of anabolism. Metabolism is life. It represents human energy. The metabolic rate reflects how rapidly the body is using its energy stores, and this rate can vary tremendously depending on a number of factors. For all practical purposes, the total daily energy in expenditure, or TDEE, may be accounted for by three factors: energy for basal metabolism, energy for processing food intake, and energy for physical activity. Basal energy expenditure accounts for the largest component of TDEE, whereas physical activity is the most variable. We shall examine basal energy expenditure and the effect of eating in this section, while the role of physical activity or exercise will be covered in this section, human energy metabolism during exercise. So, what factors account for the amount of energy expended during rest? The body is constantly using energy to build up and tear down substances within the cells. Certain automatic body functions, such as contraction of the heart, breathing, secretion of hormones, and the constant activity of the nervous system, also are consuming energy. Basal metabolism, or the BMR, basal metabolic rate, represents the energy requirements of the many different cellular and tissue processes that are necessary to continuing physiological activities in a resting post-absorptive rate throughout most of the day. Other than sleeping, it is the lowest rate of energy expenditure. The determination of the BMR is a clinical procedure conducted in a laboratory or hospital setting. The individual fasts for 12 hours. Then, with the subject in a reclining position, the individual's oxygen consumption and carbon dioxide production are measured. Through proper calculations, the BMR is determined. Basal energy expenditure, or BEE, represents the BMR extrapolated over a 24-hour period. The resting metabolic rate is slightly higher than the BMR. It represents the BMR plus small amounts of additional energy expenditure associated with eating and previous muscular activity. According to the National Academy of Sciences, the BMR and RMR differ by less than 10%. Consequently, although there are some fine differences between the two terms, they are often used interchangeably. Additionally, the term resting energy expenditure is used to account for the energy processes at rest when extrapolated over 24 hours. In general, we shall use REE to also represent RMR. Although some of the energy released during oxidative processes at rest supports physiological functions such as pumping activity of the heart muscle, the majority of energy is released as heat, a thermal effect that it keeps our body temperature at about 98.6 Fahrenheit or 37 degrees Celsius. Eating a meal and exercising are two other factors that induce a thermic effect. So what effect does eating a meal have on the metabolic rate? The significant elevation of the metabolic rate that occurs after ingestion of a meal was previously known as the specific dynamic action of food, but it is now referred to as dietary-induced thermogenesis, or thermic effect of food, TEF. This elevation is usually highest about 1 hour after a meal and lasts for about 4 hours, and it is due to the energy necessary to absorb, transport, store, and metabolize the food consumed. The greater the caloric content of the meal, the greater this TEF effect. Also, the type of food ingested may affect the magnitude of the TEF. The TEF for protein approximates about 20 to 30%, whereas carbohydrates approximate 5 to 10%, and the effect of fat is minimal at about 0 to 5%. Cravetti and others noted that a very high protein meal, 68% of calories, elicited a greater TEF for 7 hours post-eating than did corresponding diets high in carbohydrate and fat. Even though the increased TEF amounts to only about 6 calories more per hour, small daily changes in energy balance can lead to a weight gain. About 6 calories per hour for 7 hours, 365 days per year, that's about 15,339 additional calories per year. So there is some advantage from incorporating more protein into the diet for weight loss purposes, and we'll talk about that more in Chapter 11. The TEF is expressed as a percent of the energy content of the ingested meal. The normal increase in the BMR due to TEF from a mixed meal of carbohydrate, fat, and protein is about 5%. A TEF of 10% will only account for 50% of a 500-calorie meal. The remaining 450 calories are available for energy use by the other body processes. The TEF effect accounts for approximately 5 to 10% of the total daily energy expenditure. The role of TEF in obesity is somewhat controversial. Overfeeding may increase TEF, whereas underfeeding will decrease it. In a recent review, Westerterp indicated that alternative overfeeding and underfeeding may result in a positive energy balance, which may be one of the explanations for the increasing incidence of obesity in our current society. And we'll talk more about Chapter 10 and 11 and that concerning diets for weight control. So how can I estimate my daily resting energy expenditure, or REE? There are several ways to estimate your REE, but whichever method is used, the value obtained is an estimate and will have some error associated with it. To get a truly accurate reading, you would need a clinical evaluation, such as a standard BMR test. Accurate determination of REE is important for clinicians dealing with obesity patients. For such testing, it is needed to rule out hypometabolism. However, a number of formula estimates may give you an approximation of your daily REE. Table 3.4 provides a simple method for calculating the REE of males and females of varying ages. Examples are provided in the table along with calculation of a 10% variability. Keep in mind that it is only an estimate of the daily REE, and additional energy would be expended during the day through the TEF effect and the effect of physical activity as noted later. A very simple, rough estimate of your REE is 1 calorie per kilogram of body weight per hour. Using this procedure, the estimated value for the male is about 1,680 calories per day. And for the female, it's about 1,320 calories per day. Values that are not substantially different from those calculated by the table procedure. So what genetic factors affect my REE? Your REE is directly related to the amount of metabolically active tissue you possess. At rest, tissues such as the heart, liver, kidneys, and other internal organs are more metabolically active than muscle tissue, but muscle tissue is more metabolically active than fat. Changes in the proportion of these tissues in your body will therefore cause changes in your REE. Wu and others identified almost 2,400 genes significantly are correlated with REE. Many factors influencing the REE, such as age, gender, natural hormonal activity, body size and surface area, and to a degree body composition, are genetically determined. The effect of some of these factors on the REE is generally well known. Because infants have a large proportion of metabolically active tissue and are growing rapidly, their REE is extremely high. The REE declines through childhood, adolescence, and adulthood as full growth and maturation are achieved. Individuals with naturally greater muscle mass in comparison to body fat have a higher REE. The REE of women is about 10 to 15% lower than that of men, mainly because women have a higher proportion of fat to muscle tissue. Genetically, lean individuals have a higher REE than do stocky individuals because their body surface area ratio is larger in proportion to their weight or body volume, and they lose more body heat through radiation. The role of genes and the etiology of obesity is discussed in detail in Chapter 10. So how do dieting and body composition affect my REE? Body composition may be changed so as to alter REE. Losing body weight, including both body fat and muscle tissue, generally lowers the total daily REE. The REE may be decreased significantly in obese individuals who go on a very low-calorie diet of less than 800 calories per day. The decrease in the REE, which is greater than would be due to weight loss alone, may be caused by lowered levels of thyroid hormones. In one study, the REE of obese subjects dropped 9.4% on a diet containing only 472 calories per day. The possibility of decreased REE in some athletes who maintain low body weight through exercise, such as female distance runners and male wrestlers, has been the subject of recent debate. And we'll talk about that in Chapter 10 when we discuss body composition. In contrast, maintaining normal body weight while reducing body fat and increasing muscle mass may raise the REE slightly because muscle tissue has a somewhat higher metabolic level than fat tissue, or because the ratio of body surface area to body weight is increased. The decline in the REE that occurs with aging may be attributed partially to physical inactivity with a consequent loss of the more metabolically active muscle tissue and an accumulation of body fat. The type of body fat may also influence REE. White fat or white adipose tissue is metabolically different from brown fat or brown adipose tissue. Park and others note that white fat is a major source of health problems associated with obesity, primarily via its role in promoting inflammation or metabolic dysfunction in the body. On the other hand, Lee and others note that brown fat plays a key role in energy homeostasis, and via its function to burn calories to generate heat, may help protect against diet-induced obesity. We'll talk more about the role of white and brown fat in Chapter 10. So what environmental factors may also influence the REE? Several lifestyle and environmental factors, including some foods we eat or drink, may influence our metabolism. For example, although caffeine is not a food, it is a common ingredient in some of the foods we may eat or drink. Caffeine is a stimulant and may elicit a significant rise in the REE. One study reported that the caffeine in 2 or 3 cups of regular coffee increased the REE 10 to 12%. Hot, spicy foods such as hot peppers containing capsaicin can also exert a modest stimulant effect on the metabolism. Smoking cigarettes also raises the REE. Apparently, the nicotine in tobacco stimulates the metabolism similarly to caffeine. This may be one of the reasons some individuals gain weight when they stop smoking. A long time ago, cigarettes were advertised on major radio shows as a means to lose weight. Although some may still smoke cigarettes for weight control, such practices are strongly discouraged given the many associated adverse health effects. Climatic conditions, especially temperature changes, may also raise the REE. Exposure to the cold may stimulate the secretion of several hormones and muscle shivering, which may stimulate heat production up to 400% to help us stay warm. Exposure to warm or hot environments will increase energy expenditure through greater cardiovascular demands and the sweating response. Altitude exposure will also increase REE due to increased ventilation. Many of these factors influencing the REE are important themselves, but may also be important considerations relative to weight control programs and body temperature regulation. Thus, they are discussed further in later chapters. So what energy sources are used during rest? The vast majority of the energy consumed during a resting situation is used to drive the automatic physiological processes in the body. Because the muscles expend little energy during rest, there is no need to produce ATP rapidly. Hence, the oxygen system is able to provide the necessary ATP for resting physiological processes. The oxygen system can use carbohydrates, fat, and protein as energy sources. However, protein is not used as a major energy source during normal dietary conditions. Carbohydrates and fats, when combined with oxygen in the cells, are the major energy substrates during rest. Several factors may influence which of the two nutrients is predominantly used. In general, though, on a mixed diet of carbohydrate, protein, and fat, about 40% of the REE is derived from carbohydrate and about 60% from fat. However, eating a diet rich in carbohydrate or fat will increase the percent of the REE derived, respectively, from carbohydrate and fat. Also, when carbohydrate levels are low, such as after an overnight fast, the percentage of the RE derived from fat increases. Warm or hot? Okay, I'm not sure. That concludes our discussion today over the energy systems. We'll pick up more in chapter 3. We will be continuing in a little bit later. All right, thanks. Y'all have a great day.